Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session of People Metrics Live. Today, I'll be talking to Sean McDade, founder and CEO of People Metrics, about his new book, Pharma Customer Experience, 20 Secrets to 10x Your CX and Boost Patient Outcomes. Now, in our last session, Sean, we discussed why you wrote the book and what Pharma Customer Experience is. So today I thought we could focus on how Pharma Customer Experience fits into the pharma world and talk some about program implementation.
Great to be here. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great holiday season.
So let's jump into it. Sean, pharma CX is broad. Can you talk about how it applies in the pharma world? Are we talking about commercial or clinical, or what are we talking about here?
I think we're talking about everything. So we've heard patient centricity being a word that's used across many pharma companies. I think even we may have mentioned this last time, but in chapter 1, we go through the top 30 pharma companies and look at their mission and vision statement. And almost all of them have something around patient or human centricity or something around focused on the patient, even if it was inferred. So I think it's key that pharma think of their customer first, like other great CX, customer experience companies have done in the past. So the book is really about helping pharma with changing their focus and mindset from product to experience, customer experience. And it applies from clinical trials and how the patient experience is through that journey, from the time they're recruited to the time they first enter the trial, to each subsequent time they visit the site, to when the trial is over. That's an experience that can certainly be created, measured, managed, and improved over time. And that's in a clinical setting. In a commercial setting, the opportunities are many. We focus a lot in the book on patient support services, which is a natural way to kind of use case, we think, of how pharma customer experience is in action, where someone is onboarding onto a new medication and pharma is supporting them in some way, either through internal teams, partner hubs, or digital assets, right? It's all kind of combined now. Helping them onboard and then adhere to their medication over time, which then links to outcomes. And there's other, we think, use cases around pharma customer experience outside of patient support services, but that's a great one to start with because that also impacts HCPs who are learning about the support available, and then they tell their patients about it. And it's a great, way that we think pharma can start to change their mindset around what they're really offering beyond, great, groundbreaking, incredible products. We're not trying to downplay that at all. That's the basis for it. But to really raise it to the next level, we think experiences around those products really, really matter. And we think that that's going to be, and we know that's a key differentiator for pharma in the future. And it will, in fact, determine whether lives are continued, saved, and lived at a higher level. That's what the experience means. It's much more meaningful than other industries where it's still important, but we just think the stakes are higher with pharma.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Yeah, so it sounds like there's really broad application of the secrets that you talk about in the book. And you mentioned patient support services. Do you think that's really the lowest hanging fruit? That should be the point of entry?
I think so for commercial. Commercial definitely. There are, almost every new product has patient support services tied to it. For specialty and rare disease, obviously it can be, a full-blown, operation with case managers and patients assigned to those case managers and case managers navigating the patient and the HCP through the various hurdles that you have with regard to onboarding onto a complex medication. But even with mass market products with digital assets, it still needs to be kind of the experience of learning about the therapeutic area, the product or drug you're taking, how you're going to live with this disease, if it's a chronic condition, what other support groups are available. These are all things that are digitally available, and there's an experience there too, right? So, Matt, the whole book is about, don't let these experiences go to chance. Curate these experiences, create them intentionally, measure them consistently, and then take action on them all the time to improve them. Like that's kind of the playbook, right, in hospitality, and it's the playbook in other industries that have really embraced CX, customer experience. These aren't, like, I think, novel concepts, but maybe they're a bit novel applied to pharmaceutical and biotechnology use cases, which is really what the book is all about. But yes, patient support services is super important. Just back to that, without a doubt.
Yeah, but I think what you just said is so interesting about both making sure that you're curating the experiences, that you're aware of all the touch points that patients are having and HCPs are having. And then while these might not be novel ideas in general, I think this really is new in this space. And, we've seen it evolve over the last few years into something really important.
Without a doubt. So much so that, like I said, with patient support services, we've been able to do so much work in that space that, we've got questions that we know work. We have a model that we know at least describes what needs you have to fulfill for the patients for them to be likely to onboard onto the new medication. We've done work with helping companies understand adherence levels and how experiences impact that, and how do we get folks to not only onboard but make sure they're adhering at different milestones, like 6 months and 12 months. And support is a key part of all that. And it's a support puzzle, right, Audrey? It's for certain rare disease, like, yeah, you want to throw people at it. You definitely want to have a contact center. You want to have case managers. For other products, maybe there's a mix between a call center and a digital asset. For other products, it's probably all digital, but it doesn't really matter what mechanism you're delivering the experience. The model still applies. You have to create the experiences. You have to make sure that they're right by measuring them. And then you have to constantly improve them over time. That's the way it works. And it's constant iterations with regard to the customer experience. And what this book is trying to do is just say to pharma people, like, hey, these tools are available. The impact is huge. You can make a big difference in people's lives if those experiences lead to a better chance of onboarding and adhering. You've got it's an amazing opportunity to make an impact by using known techniques that customer experience professionals have been using for a while. But to your point also, we have specific patient support services information in that book. So there are there's 10 chapters, I think, on the importance of patient support services, the questions you should ask, some benchmarks that we share around levels of success in meeting patient needs, as well as, like, practically, what do you do if someone does have a poor experience? Like, what happens, right? So there's all of these things in this book that gets pretty specific to patient support services. So if you're in patient support services, you should read the book. Like, you'll definitely, I think, get something out of it. Now, everybody will get something out. If you work in pharma or biotech, I think the first part of the book will apply to almost everyone.
Yeah.
It's about patient centricity and customer centricity, and how it applies broadly to commercial and clinical, and how it differs from market research, and how experiences are critical for product launches. And on the clinical side too, we provide specific questions that you can ask during the patient experience. And this is, again, outside of their reactions or their intake of the medication. We're not talking about effects of that. We're talking about the experience outside the medication. And so we have, I think, really practical tips, tools, and techniques for both clinical and commercial in the book.
Yeah, I think my take on it is that the first section of the book is about strategy. and making
Yep.
sure you understand the big picture. And then the rest of the book talks about tactical specifics about what you can do to really get your program off the ground, improve your program if you already have one. And I want to dive into that a little bit here.
Yeah.
So what are some highlights? What are some keys to success that patient support services leaders need to make sure they're aware of?
Yeah, well, I think, in a lot of cases, it's measurement becomes like, it may become overwhelming. Like, oh, where there's all these touches and what do we do? And what do we ask? And everybody has their own opinion. And, first thing you should do is map your journey, right? So that's the thing I talk about. And that's like, you were talking about strategy. That's really the strategy part. Mapping the patient and HCP's journey with your customer support services is key to starting any program. So you want to make sure that you understand every touch point that you have with those folks to make sure that you're understanding whether they're going well or not. And once you understand the journey, you can start thinking about, is this journey the journey we want for our customers, right? I mean, that's one of the great, you've done these, right, Audrey? Like, one of the great parts of that exercise is people saying, this isn't the journey we want our customers to go on, right? It's got to be easier than that, or this is too hard for the customer to find out about patient support services. And our salespeople aren't telling the HCPs that it's even available. And the HCPs, it's not top of mind for them to tell the patients. And even when the patients are aware, they forget to call, or they should just be able to enroll online when we're forcing them to do this on the phone. There's all these different parts of the journey. It's different for everyone, but mapping that journey, that's definitely low-hanging fruit. And once you map it, you can start to make changes and truly creating the experience you want your customer, the patient, HCP within support services to have. And then it's about, getting down and measuring that thing to make sure it is what you think it is. And it's not going to be what you think it is, at least all the time. So focusing in on, the onboarding touch point, Audrey, we've seen that again and again is critical. And that's one that I would always recommend starting with. Map the journey of that onboarding process, map it for both HCPs and patients, and then start measuring that onboarding touch point systematically, consistently, and such that you can get feedback regularly on how it's going. Because that is your job. That's the job, right? That the experience is good, right? We have data that shows us. Experience is good with patient support services. Patient almost always on boards. Experience not so good with patient support services delivered by pharma or partner hub. About 1/3 say they're not sure if they're going to onboard. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big deal, especially when this is medication that patients need. It's so important for them to have that seamless and easy onboarding experience so that they adhere to and follow through with the medication.
Look, and let me do the caveat I always do with this, right? We know that pharma goes and biotech have regulations and hurdles that other industries don't. Sometimes that creates friction you can't like reduce altogether, but you can reduce it some. And that's really what a great experience is all about. Making it a frictionless, easy process for someone to go through to reach their goal, right? And they feel like they did that in as few steps as possible, and they felt like they got something out of it. And in this case, they got something out of it means they're onboarding onto a medication that will either save their life, extend their life, or improve their quality of life.
Yeah.
So these are big outcomes, right? These are big outcomes for the patient, for the HCP, for their family, their caregivers, everyone else. And the pharma industry, as they should, reaps rewards when they are effectively helping people do that. And, from a financial standpoint, we know that, prescribing and adhering are keys to pharma getting their return on their substantial R&D investment in a lot of these products. So to me, when you think about how much it costs to produce a drug these days, and then the marketing budgets on them, the marketing budget should focus some on this experience part. And they are, like, there's more and more they are. And that's what's happening. So it's not just promoting it, it's making sure that once someone is prescribed it, that the experience is great onboarding onto it. And that's one little piece of the puzzle that is the lowest hanging fruit and has the biggest impact. In the book, we go through, specific questions that you can ask for that onboarding process that link to each patient needs. And I've done a People Metrics Live on this model. It's called the patient hierarchy of needs. It includes 5 needs that you need to fulfill for each patient when they're onboarding onto a new medication. It all surrounds their experience at each phase. We have questions, we have benchmarks, these have been vetted by legal teams at Pharma. So while you should talk to your legal team, I think it'll go through quicker than most. That's where you get started. There it is. There's the book.
Yeah, since you mentioned that diagram, I'm going to try and pull it up here. I think I know where it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the beginning of
so
talking.
It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
Yes, which is a well-known framework.
Yeah.
And then this is how we apply to it. So, the base need is I can afford this. It's meaning navigating the insurance hurdles, making sure there's, if there's any patient assistance programs available, they're provided to the patient via the support services, et cetera. And then once I know I can afford this and pay for it, I know how to get the medication. Where can I get it? Is it a reasonable time frame for rare disease? This might be, at some, at a clinic or medical facility or somewhere. And then I know how to administer this medicine. Some medicines now are more complex to administer than others. So how do I do that? And then once that need is fulfilled, there's a support system that patients just feel like they need support, especially as the drug becomes more and more complex. So it's something around, as simple as a case manager or a call center they can call to just talk and get questions answered, to, support groups in general that might have, patients who have similar diseases. And once they feel supported, then the confidence goes up to onboard. If any of these are missing, it's very hard to onboard, and we see the odds going down that onboarding would occur. But this is all in the book, like you said, Audrey. There's the model, and there's a chapter on each one of these needs.
Yeah, the book is really great at explaining each one of these. And what I really was sort of eye-opening for me when you were going through this process and after reading the book was thinking about how much effort and time and money goes into developing these medications. And then it wasn't happening that there was the same amount of follow-through going into making sure that there was easy access and that patients could get what they needed and knew where to go for help, and helping them stay on the medications. And I think that's starting to change now. And it makes sense. It's sort of a no-brainer. It becomes a win-win for everybody who's involved in the process.
Yeah, I think it's very much a shift in perspective for pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies. It used to be a product and sales type, like it was either let's spend it on R&D, and then let's spend a lot on sales and marketing to push it out to physicians, and then everything else will take care of itself. Now, pharma is realizing smartly that there is more to that second phase than just sending lots of salespeople out to physicians' offices, right? There is, well, once they're prescribed, how do we make sure that they actually do this? Like, how is it? Let's make sure that it's easy to onboard. Let's make sure it's easy to adhere. And if people aren't adhering, let's figure out why not and give them more support than they have today to do so. Or if it's not easy to onboard, let's figure out why not, and let's change some things to help them onboard. This is like very much the same as, our non-pharma clients. When, you get a new customer, and getting a new customer once usually takes a lot of money and effort and everything. And it should be easy for that customer to, either use the product, service, or whatever. But if they only use that once, then it's often lost leader, right? It's not even a leader, it's a loss. You have to figure out ways to support them on their journey to continue to get value out of whatever you're providing and buy again or use the service again. And that's what it's all about, right? And that's making it easy. And it's really the same model here. How do you get a patient to get onboarded for the first time, and then how do you make it easy for them to continue their medication and their treatment journey.
Absolutely. So are there any things to watch out for? You mentioned regulations. Are there any other things that one needs to be aware of when thinking about implementing a new program?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So this is a little different than our non-pharma clients in that, if there's a poor experience in a non-regulated industry, now these days, typically we would send an alert to whoever's responsible for that customer or client with basically all their information on it, the customer information, and they would go follow up and make it right. Right? Like, especially for high value customers, like which we do a lot of work in at People Metrics. Like if it's, a client in a B2B company or a member of a credit union or somebody that, they really want to make sure they get right, they go and do that. Now, with pharma, especially with rare disease, that model still applies because we know every patient is really valuable. A lot of in-house patient support services are focused on rare disease because you need to make sure that every single patient onboards, because there may only be hundreds or thousands of them in the world, right? So that's a really important part. The one thing that is a little different, and we included there's a chapter on follow-up and what if there's a poor experience, what do you do? There are some regulations on when an alert gets triggered in pharma. It's not the same, right? It does not have any personal identifiable information. There's a code that gets put in that only select people within the pharmaceutical company can access and do that follow-up. And those have to be vetted ahead of time. So the alert management, we would call it. An alert is just something that goes out when a patient has a poor experience, is different. The other thing that's different is you have to have adverse event reporting, obviously, on something like this. So, if there's an open-ended question, and for some of our clients, there are no open-ended questions, right, Audrey? I mean, you run these programs, yeah. So there isn't that issue. But for some, there are. And when there are, even if we're not asking for anything about their reaction to medication, someone may put something in that open-ended comment. And open-end means the patient is allowed to type anything they want. So it would be, something around, how satisfied were you with the patient support services you received at Pharma XY? You're putting a rating, and then we're asking why. And the why could include things like, my case manager was great. I felt prepared for treatment. I knew exactly where to go to get all the stuff we were talking about here. Or it could be something around some negative reaction to the medication. When that's the case, you have to have a process in place, and you know this even better than I do, to get that to the client and then to the FDA.
Yes, yeah. So this adverse event reporting is a big part of these programs, and whoever you're working with to implement a program needs to understand it, has to go through training, and then has to review all of the open-ended comments to make sure that no adverse events were reported. If one was, it's fine. It just needs to be shared in a specific way back to the pharmaceutical company so that they can log it with all their other reports about that specific medication. So it's very important because it's about the medication and how people are reacting to it. And so some clients have decided not to include open-ended comments, but others really want to gather that rich feedback, want to hear what their patients have to say, and are willing to put the adverse event reporting in place in order to do so.
Yeah, and this would be like, for these programs that we typically do with our clients, some of them are going out to all patients and HCPs at once. We call that a relationship survey, right? And this is in the book also. And yes. Others, we're continuously measuring, honing in on this onboarding experience, and the program continues for, lots of, there it is. Yes. So the relationship, you can see what that is. It tends to be a snapshot of what's going on. Lots of responses, primarily just to get a sense for how well you're doing delivering the experience, what big things could you change? You might be even asking competitor questions on that. How are you compared to, especially with HCPs, how are support services different from other products that you have patients on? Where transactional is really what we're talking about with regard to follow-up, right? The transactional is going on all the time. We send a survey out very soon after the experience itself. So it's very soon, say after an onboarding happens or after a call to a contact center or a case manager occurs. These are really short surveys. We generally are not compensating people for them. There's not as many responses, but they can result in follow-up with poor experiences, and it also can involve when all data are rolled up, you can start seeing trends as well. So these are the couple ways that you can approach it. If you're just starting out, I'd always recommend doing a relationship. Let's see where we are. Let's see which touch points are really painful, and then set up a transactional program around that touch point and get more continuous data to improve that.
Yeah, I think often people are not sure which one of these to use, and what you're saying here makes a lot of sense, to do the relationship and get a baseline, and then design your transactional program based on what you've learned in that relationship study.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anybody can do this. Like if you have patient support services and I know we've been focusing on that today, but that's the use case we've talked about a lot in the book. You can get something going without like a lot of pain and friction by doing a relationship study to just start. And then once you get a taste of it, you may want to move into something that's more continuous and transactional and gets more people involved in the organization, because the transactional programs ideally should go down to the patient support services team. And they should get that information. But if you're head of patient support services or you're an insights professional focused on a drug that has support services linked to it, doing a relationship survey is a great start.
Yeah, and having the data from the relationship survey will allow you to make an informed decision about how to do the transactional. You can walk into that meeting and say, here's what we learned and here's what I know we need to do, and you'll have the data to back it up.
There's lots more on the book on like practical considerations of who you need to include in these programs. Like, you have to get these approved by legal, and a market research insights person is often somebody who's critical to this. The patient support services lead or sponsor is key. Yeah, so there's more around implementation. There's several chapters on just like implementing one of these things.
Yeah, there's tons of information in the book, and I know we can't cover it all today. So Sean, since we're coming up on the end of our time, is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap it up for the day?
No, I'm just that I hope that people get value out of this. I think there's big opportunities to improve experiences for all pharma customers. And there's low-hanging fruit there that can enable pharma companies to really differentiate themselves in this area. And I think this is the first of hopefully many types of books like this to come that dives into different ways pharma can improve the experiences of their customers, resulting in really, really outsized outcomes compared to some other industries we deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, Sean, let's wrap it up there. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview today. If you want to go over to Amazon, you can get Pharma Customer Experience now. The ebook version is available. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us via peoplemetrics.com or on social about anything related to Pharma Customer Experience. And thank you so much for joining us today.